Hello. My name's Emerald and yes, like the stone, I don't shatter easy. My sister stole my engagement ring, right off my finger, live on camera, and my dad. He called it, just sharing. But it wasn't just a ring, it was what it meant. And when that diamond flew off in the middle of her staged performance, everything they buried, everything they denied, came undone. Now tell me, what happens when the quiet one finally speaks? I had just poured a cup of strong coffee, the kind that lingered on the tongue and clung to your throat like truth you didn't want to say. The early spring sun streamed through my Portland apartment window, brushing across the countertop and casting long shadows from the tulips I'd bought 2 days ago. Outside, cherry blossoms danced on the breeze, their petals like confetti tossed by nature itself. I breathed in deeply, letting myself believe, foolishly, that the day would unfold quietly. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at it without urgency, expecting a text from a coworker or maybe a reminder from my calendar. But it was an email. A forwarded one, no less. The subject line made my stomach twist before I even opened it. Engagement celebration, at home. I opened it slowly, as if peeling back the seal on something sacred I had no right to touch. My name was there. The party was about me, an engagement celebration thrown by my parents. Except I hadn't been told. Not a call, not a message, not a hint. And certainly not a choice. The invitation had already gone out to the family. A full-scale event, catered food, live string quartet, floral arrangements. I stared at the guest list and felt the air squeeze from my lungs. My mother had invited cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, distant relatives I barely remembered, neighbors from our old street who once criticized my bangs at age 14. It wasn't a celebration, it was a performance. And I was the lead in a play I never agreed to star in. I set the phone down gently on the counter as though dropping it harder might shatter the illusion I was trying to cling to. My coffee had gone cold, untouched. I closed my eyes and saw the version of this day I had once imagined, something soft, something honest, something filled with warm hugs, spontaneous toasts, and a small group of people who truly mattered. I had always hoped for intimacy, not spectacle. But Callista had rewritten the script. My sister, flawless, calculated Callista, was good at this. Her world ran on optics and orchestration. She was the family's crown jewel, and I had always been the clasp that quietly kept the necklace together. She didn't throw parties, she staged them. And this was her stage. I grabbed my coat, keys, and my voice, though the last one was the heaviest to carry. I drove the familiar streets toward my childhood home, each red light offering a rehearsal in my head, what I'd say. How I'd say it. Whether it would matter. The house had changed since I moved out. It had become more curated, more sterile, like a magazine spread with no room for real living. The front door stood wide open, decorated with soft white blooms, ivy twisted around string lights that sparkled even in daylight. Inside, I was hit with the scent of lilies and polished wood. From the foyer, I could hear Muriel, my mother's interior decorator friend, fretting over the height of a centerpiece. I stepped further in and spotted Callista in the living room, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, giving direction like a general in designer heels. She looked up, saw me, and offered a practiced smile. "Emerald, you're here." As if I had just shown up for a fitting. My mother appeared from behind a curtain of floating peonies, her face perfectly powdered and lips painted in a way that said, "Everything is fine." "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Callista," I said, my voice steady but quiet. My mother's eyes sparkled. "Your sister has such good taste, doesn't she?" she said, gesturing toward the floral arch framing the guest book table. "Everything just looks so elevated." I forced a nod, the kind that kept peace and swallowed pride. Inside, something shifted. Not just hurt, but a kind of betrayal I hadn't named yet. I escaped upstairs to my old bedroom. The walls were still painted sea glass blue, though the posters of my youth had been replaced with abstract prints. I opened the drawer where I had left my engagement ring earlier that week, carefully placed, inside its velvet box. The box was there. But it was empty. My heart dropped. Cold sweat broke across my back. I rushed into the hallway, dread rising with each step. I followed the sound of laughter and clinking glasses back into the living room. The moment I entered, I felt the energy shift, like walking into a room moments after your name has been mentioned. I didn't raise my voice at first. "Where is the ring?" I asked plainly, my eyes locked on Callista. The room hushed. Muriel stopped mid-comment. A florist paused, pruning shears still open. Callista blinked, surprised, but not guilty. Then my father stepped in. "She's just borrowing it for some photos," he said casually, resting a hand on Callista's arm. "It's not a big deal, Emerald. She wanted to try it with different lighting for the shoot. You know, Instagram." I felt the slap, though no hand was raised. He made it sound harmless, even generous. But it wasn't. No one had asked. No one had even told me. They had simply taken. I stared at them, jaw tight. "I'm not asking for permission, I'm asking for respect." The silence that followed was thick with discomfort. Callista looked away, pretending her phone needed attention. My mother gave me a look that said, "Don't make a scene." And my father, he just stood there, unmoved, as if I were the unreasonable one. I turned without another word. No one followed me. No one asked me to stay. Outside, the sky had dulled, clouds dimming the sun like a closing curtain. I got into my car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. I didn't drive off right away. I just sat there, letting the quiet hold me the way my family never had. Then the screen on my phone lit up. A notification. A video. It was Callista. Smiling. Twirling. Wearing my ring. Showing it off to her followers like it had always belonged to her. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just a party. It was a silent slap, a declaration. And I would no longer stand still for it. The drive home felt longer than usual, though the city was half asleep and the roads were mostly clear. I remember the glow of the streetlight sliding across my windshield, those orange pools of light passing like silent witnesses. I wasn't crying, not even angry, just hollow, like someone had taken the air out of me. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, vibrating against the leather. I ignored it for a while. When I finally parked in front of my apartment, the vibration started again, persistent, insistent. I picked it up. A message from a friend, Jenna. "Hey, is this real?" Attached was a short video clip. I clicked on it without thinking. And there she was. Callista. My sister. Laughing into the camera, sitting close beside her boyfriend at what looked like a fancy rooftop bar. Her wine glass caught the city lights. Her smile was rehearsed, effortless, the kind that always won her attention. But it wasn't her face that froze me. It was her hand. The ring. My ring. I leaned closer to the screen. I knew that band. The way the diamond caught light, it was unmistakable. My breath came in shallow bursts. I thought maybe she'd borrowed it again, maybe it was just for the night. But then the audio cut through. Her boyfriend said, "That ring suits you, Cal." And she replied with a playful laugh, "He picked the perfect one, didn't he?" No correction. No mention that it wasn't hers. Just that smile, the same one she wore every time she took something and made it her own. For a moment, I forgot how to blink. The world went muffled. I replayed the clip, hoping I'd misheard. I hadn't. Every second of that video pressed against me like weight on my chest. I sat down on the couch, the apartment dim except for the light from the screen. The chat section beneath the live stream exploded with hearts and congratulations. Strangers wrote things like, "She's glowing. What a beautiful ring. He's such a keeper." I scrolled through, fingers trembling. She smiled at each comment, tossed her hair, and adjusted the ring for the camera as if to make sure it caught every reflection. Every sparkle was like a knife. Then she leaned toward the camera, lowering her voice into something soft and sugary. "When he proposed, it just felt right," she said. The words didn't just sting, they branded. I could feel heat in my neck, my pulse in my ears. That ring wasn't just jewelry. It was a promise. A piece of my life. My story. And she was rewriting it in real time for strangers to applaud. I wanted to call her. To scream. To demand why she thought she could do this again. But then I saw my reflection in the dark glass of my phone, tired eyes, clenched jaw. I remembered every other time I tried to speak up and how the words never made it past their comfort zone. Instead, I opened our family group chat. My thumbs hovered above the keyboard before typing. Did anyone see Callista's live just now? I hit send and waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Nothing. By the time I brushed my teeth and changed into pajamas, the screen finally lit up. My dad. He wrote, "She's just showing it off. Don't make it a big deal." A few seconds later, Mom chimed in, "You know your sister, she's always been more outgoing. Try not to take things so personally." I stared at their words until they blurred. Not a big deal. More outgoing. That's what they always said. As if confidence excused disrespect. As if I was expected to shrink, again, for the sake of peace. I didn't respond. There was no point. The silence that followed wasn't just absence of sound, it was agreement. Their kind of agreement, the one that always left me outside the circle, watching through the glass. The apartment was still. The clock ticked toward midnight. I opened the window and let the night air in. Portland smelled faintly of rain and wet concrete. The coolness helped me breathe again. It wasn't new. None of it was. My mind drifted back to my graduation day. I'd been the first in our family to finish college. I'd planned to give a short speech at the small celebration Mom threw. But when the moment came, Callista took the microphone before I could reach it. She'd said she wanted to say a few words, and those few words stretched into 20 minutes about how proud she was to be my sister. How much she'd guided me. Everyone laughed and clapped. When I finally stood there, all I could do was smile and thank her. That was the pattern. I built, she performed. And everyone loved the performance. I sat on the couch now, the quiet hum of the fridge filling the room. My phone buzzed again, a notification from social media. The clip was trending locally. My sister's name. My ring. My story. All borrowed, edited, and shared. I thought about calling my fiancé, Ethan, but I stopped myself. He'd had a long week, and I didn't want to sound paranoid or petty. He trusted me to handle my family dynamics. Maybe I'd even downplayed them before. Maybe I didn't want him to see how deep the cracks ran. I took a breath and decided to do what no one in my family expected me to do, stay quiet, but not passive. I replayed the video one last time, then downloaded it to my phone. I took screenshots of the comments, the timestamp, even the angle where the diamond caught the light. Every piece of proof, neatly stored in a folder. It wasn't about revenge. It was about record. I whispered to the empty room, "You don't get to erase me anymore." The next morning, the rain had stopped. Light crept through the blinds, pale and soft. I made coffee, the same way I always did, half milk, 1 spoon of sugar, but it tasted different, stronger somehow. I scrolled through the group chat again. Still no new messages. Then a new notification popped up. Callista had posted another clip, this time thanking her followers for their sweet words about our big news. I watched it once, expressionless. She'd learned to build her own reality, and my family had always been her audience. But this time, I wouldn't be her silent backdrop. I started organizing everything I'd collected into a private folder labeled Proof. My fingers felt steady for the first time all night. When people refuse to hear your truth, you learn to let the evidence speak for you. What hurt wasn't the theft, it was how familiar it felt to watch myself disappear, again. The glow from my tablet lit up the dark room. I had been lying there for hours, unable to sleep, the same question echoing in my head, how long had they been doing this, rewriting me out of my own life? The rain had started again, tapping softly on the window, a rhythm steady enough to keep my thoughts from unraveling completely. I scrolled through the photos folder labeled Family Moments. The first few albums were predictable, birthdays, holidays, Callista's award ceremonies. Then, near the bottom, I found one labeled Graduation, 2010. I opened it, smiling despite myself. There I was, cap crooked, eyes bright, holding my diploma like it was the world. For a moment, I almost forgot the ache that brought me here. But when I swiped to the next picture, my breath caught. It was the framed photo that hung in my parents' living room, Mom and Dad in the center, Callista beaming beside them. Except in this version, I was there too. The original image. The one they'd cropped. I stared at it for a long time, tracing the edge where the cut would have been. My arm was around Mom's waist in that version. The photo in their living room had trimmed it off neatly, as if I'd never existed in that moment. Why would they hang the edited one? My stomach turned. I hadn't noticed it before, how the frame on their wall felt off balance, as though something was missing. Turns out, it was me. I closed the tablet and sat up, the weight in my chest heavier than the silence. Some part of me wanted to believe it was a mistake. Maybe the printer had cropped it by accident, or they'd chosen the version that looked cleaner. But another part of me, older, more bruised, knew better. Morning came quietly. I didn't sleep much, but I needed answers. By mid-morning, I was pulling into my parents' driveway again. The same house, the same trimmed hedges, the same polite stillness. Mom opened the door, surprised to see me. Emerald. You didn't call. I needed to ask you something, I said, stepping inside. The living room was exactly how I remembered it, too perfect, too curated. My eyes went straight to the photo wall. There it was, right above the mantel. The cropped picture. I pointed at it. Mom, why did you change this photo? She looked up from the kitchen counter, coffee cup in hand. What do you mean? The original had me in it, I said, trying to keep my tone calm. This version doesn't. She frowned, taking a slow sip. Oh, that. It was just cleaner that way, sweetheart. Your dress didn't match the color scheme. The photo looked off balance. Cleaner. My throat tightened. So, you removed me for aesthetic balance. Her tone softened, almost dismissive. Don't make this a thing, Emerald. It's just a photo. To her, everything was just something. A party was just a misunderstanding. The ring was just borrowed. The photo was just cleaner. And I was just overreacting. I wanted to argue, to shout that it wasn't about the dress or the photo, it was about the pattern. But I knew what she'd say next. She'd tilt her head, sigh, and ask me why I always took things so personally. Instead, I said quietly, you know, when I look at that picture, it feels like you picked the version of our family you actually wanted. She didn't respond right away. Her eyes flickered, but only for a second. Then she said, "You've always been so sensitive, Emerald. It's exhausting. You could stand to be a little more like your sister." There it was, the script, unchanged since childhood. I turned away before she could see my face and walked to the window. Outside, the light drizzle made the pavement glisten. "Mom, about the ring, did you even think about how that would make me feel? Watching her parade it around like it was hers." She sighed, the kind that carried both annoyance and control. "Why are you so obsessed with that ring? It's a piece of jewelry. It's not worth ruining relationships over." I let out a quiet laugh, though nothing about it was funny. "You mean my relationship with Callista? Or with you?" "Don't twist my words," she said sharply. "You've always had this habit of turning everything into drama. Your sister was just having fun. You should try it sometime." Fun. Pretending to be me was fun. Taking what was mine was fun. "Mom," I said slowly, "you raised us to believe that sharing meant kindness. But what you never said was that it only counted when I was the one giving." Her jaw tightened. "Don't talk to me like that." "I'm not angry," I said, my voice shaking only slightly. "I'm just tired." The conversation ended there, not because we reached understanding, but because there was nothing left to say that she'd actually hear. Driving home, the rain turned heavier. The rhythm against the windshield matched my heartbeat. My mind kept replaying her words, "Cleaner that way." They weren't cruel words, not on the surface. But that's how it always was. The damage came soft, disguised as politeness. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about smaller memories, moments that built the foundation of my silence. When I was 8, I'd lost a tooth and wrote a little note to the tooth fairy, asking to keep it because it was my favorite. I tucked it under my pillow with the tooth inside. The next morning, the note was gone. $1 lay there instead. At breakfast, Callista held up the tiny tooth like a prize, showing Mom how cute it was. She said she'd found it on the floor. I'd cried quietly, not because of the tooth, but because I knew she'd taken it. And Mom had said, "Let her have it, Emmy. She's just excited." Even my tiny wishes had been negotiable. Now, years later, I sat in my apartment staring at that same pattern, stretched across decades. I opened my notebook and began writing. At the top of the page, what they took. Underneath, I listed my ring, my graduation photo, my place in every story. Then another heading, what I'll take back. And I left it blank, for now. Because I didn't know yet how to reclaim something intangible. But I knew I would. It hit me then, it was never about the ring. Or the photo. Or the tooth. It was about the slow fade of a person inside her own family, until only the outlines remained. The worst kind of theft isn't of things, it's of acknowledgement. I looked out the window. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean. I didn't feel clean, but I felt clear. That night, something shattered, not in my hand, but somewhere deeper, and louder. The morning after that breaking point felt unnervingly still. The sky was pale gray, the kind that promises rain but holds it hostage. I brewed coffee, stared at the slow swirl of cream, and felt something heavy but unspoken sit inside me. Clarity has a strange weight, it doesn't scream, it just settles. By Sunday, I was back at my parents' house. Callista had planned another event, a casual brunch, though nothing my sister ever organized was casual. I almost didn't go. But part of me wanted to see what pretending looked like up close, how my family wrapped pretense in lace and called it love. The backyard was crowded with laughter and gold decorations. A buffet table stretched along the patio, every plate shining. Callista stood near the center, draped in white, like she was auditioning for a bridal magazine cover. The ring caught sunlight every time she lifted her glass. My ring. Emerald, sweetie, you made it. Mom said, rushing over. She kissed my cheek as if our last conversation hadn't ended with silence. Isn't this wonderful? Callista wanted to bring everyone together. I glanced around. Everyone was smiling too widely, complimenting her on how organized she always is. It was a performance, and they were all part of the script. I took a seat at a corner table under the shade of an oak tree, half in view but half removed. From there, I could see everything. Callista laughed at something her boyfriend said, tilting her head so the light hit her hair just right. She always knew how to frame herself. Someone asked about the ring, and she extended her hand with practiced grace. It's beautiful, isn't it? She said, letting it sparkle. He really knows me. My stomach tightened. The lie rolled off her tongue as easily as breathing. Then it happened. A cousin asked to see it up close, leaning forward with a grin. Callista, never one to miss a spotlight, twisted the ring for the camera someone was holding. I saw her do it, just a little too much pressure, a little too careless. A sharp sound cut through the chatter. It wasn't loud, but it was final. The diamond detached and hit the patio tile, bouncing once before it settled. The laughter stopped midair. Conversations froze. Even the music faded, like the world itself was holding its breath. For a second, no one moved. Then Callista gasped dramatically, clutching her hand. Oh my God, she said, her voice high and trembling. It fell out. I stood instinctively, eyes on the small glinting stone lying between us. My first thought wasn't anger, it was disbelief, like watching a metaphor materialize in real time. Dad moved toward Callista. What happened? I don't know, she cried. Maybe the setting was loose. I mean, she gave it to me like that. Every head turned to me. I gave it to you. I asked, steady but quiet. Callista blinked, feigning innocence. Well, you didn't exactly stop me, did you? I felt the heat rise up my neck, not from shame but from restraint. You took it without asking. That's all I remember. The air thickened. Someone coughed. Mom stepped in with that smooth, damage control voice she always used when appearances were at risk. Let's not make a scene. It's just a ring, for heaven's sake. Dad chuckled awkwardly. We'll get it fixed, no harm done. But there was harm done. Not to the ring, but to me. Again. Callista knelt slowly, picking up the band and turning it over in her fingers. The diamond still sat on the tile, untouched, a symbol lying between ownership and denial. No one moved to hand it to me. No one even acknowledged that it was mine. It's okay, Callista said, straightening up, her tone already recovering. I'll take it to the jeweler this week. Something in me snapped, quietly, cleanly. I stepped closer, crouched down, and picked up the diamond myself. It felt cold against my skin, sharp-edged, almost alive. Don't bother, I said, pocketing it. You've done enough. A hush spread. For once, no one had a script ready. Callista opened her mouth, but Mom cut in first. Emerald, she warned, voice low, you're overreacting again. I smiled faintly. Funny. That's what you said the last time she took something that didn't belong to her. I turned to leave. Behind me, Callista muttered just loud enough, It's not my fault if she doesn't know how to share. I didn't stop walking. I just said, sharing only works when there's respect, Callista. You wouldn't know much about that. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking. Not from anger, but release. Driving home, the afternoon light broke through the clouds, scattering gold across the wet pavement. The world outside felt too bright for what just happened, almost mocking. When I reached my apartment, I placed the diamond on my kitchen counter. It looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile. I stared at it for a long time, realizing no one had bothered to check if it was damaged. They'd left it there on the ground, like it belonged to no one. It was mine. But even broken, they assumed it was still hers. That realization hurt more than anything Callista said. I sat at the table, poured myself water, and stared at my reflection in the glass. The woman looking back wasn't the quiet girl they'd raised. She was done shrinking to fit their comfort. I opened my notebook again, the one titled What They Took. Beneath the old list, I drew a new line and wrote. Today, the diamond hit the floor. Then I added. No one picked it up for me. I flipped to the next page and titled it Record of Disappearance. For years, they'd erased me in pieces, photos, stories, gestures. I'd played along because I thought love meant tolerance. But standing in that backyard, watching them all look at the fallen diamond like it was an inconvenience instead of a symbol, I finally understood something. I wasn't invisible. I was ignored. There's a difference. I put the notebook away, washed my hands, and looked out the window. The light had shifted into evening, painting the sky in soft orange. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled faintly, a warning of the storm that hadn't yet arrived. If this was a war, I wasn't going to fight with noise. I'd fight with endurance, with truth. That night, as I turned off the kitchen light, I whispered to myself, you can't silence what's already been written. If they think silence means surrender, they've never truly listened to me. The storm that had rumbled in the distance the night before arrived by morning. The rain came down steady, not violent, but constant enough to blur the world beyond my apartment window. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and laid everything out in front of me, papers, screenshots, receipts, photos. Every piece of proof was a quiet declaration, I had been seen, even if they refused to see me. The air smelled like wet asphalt and determination. I wasn't trembling anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was focused. There's a calm that comes when you stop asking for understanding and start collecting truth. I pulled out a manila folder and began filling it. The first page was the jeweler's receipt, dated and signed. Next came screenshots from Callista's live streams, her hand flashing my ring, her caption, "Can't believe he picked this one." Then, text messages, Mom's dismissive words, Dad's condescending replies. And finally, the file Aloan had given me 3 nights ago, the one I hadn't had the courage to open until now. It was around midnight when she'd shown up at my door. "I think you should have this," she'd said, slipping a flash drive into my hand. "I didn't want to get involved, but after what she did you deserve to know." I plugged it into my laptop. The file name read clip_002.mov. My pulse quickened. The video opened with Callista and her boyfriend standing in front of a camera setup. They were laughing, adjusting angles. Then, clear as daylight, I saw her twist the ring off, toss it onto the table, and say, "Let's redo that shot." The sparkle wasn't catching. "Maybe if I hold it higher, it'll look more natural." My throat tightened. Natural. The irony burned. When the video ended, I leaned back, exhaling. Aloan had been right, this wasn't about catching her in a lie. It was about proving the truth had always been there. Proof doesn't need volume. It needs precision. I placed the USB drive into the envelope, sealed it, and wrote across the front in block letters, "For family eyes only." By Sunday evening, I was standing outside my parents' house again, umbrella in hand. The driveway glistened under puddles. Through the window, I saw silhouettes moving, laughter, the sound of plates clinking. Another dinner where everything was fine. I stepped inside without knocking. Mom looked up from the dining table, surprised but too polite to show it. "Emerald. You didn't say you were coming." "I wasn't sure I would," I said, closing my umbrella and setting it aside. Dad gestured toward a chair. "Sit, we just started." Callisto was there too, in a pale blue blouse, her nails perfectly manicured, her expression unreadable. "I didn't think you'd show," she said lightly, sipping her wine. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. Without a word, I placed it in the center of the table. The sound it made, that soft thud, was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Mom frowned. "What's this?" "Everything," I said quietly. "Everything you've ignored." Callista's fork paused midair. "Oh, for God's sake, Emerald. What is this supposed to be now? Another lecture?" Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. "If this is about the ring again." "It's not about the ring," I interrupted. My voice was calm, even. "It's about what the ring represents. And this time, you don't get to define the story." I slid the envelope toward Dad. "You'll want to open that." He exchanged a look with Mom, the kind parents give when they're deciding who should play peacemaker. Finally, he tore the seal. A photo fell out first, Callista wearing my ring, smiling into her camera. Then, the receipts. The timestamps. The screenshots. And at the very bottom, the flash drive. Callista's color drained. "You went through my stuff." "No," I said, folding my hands. "You posted it. The world went through it. I just made sure it wouldn't disappear like I did." The silence was almost tender in its tension. Mom reached for the envelope, flipping through the papers. "Emerald, this is unnecessary. We all know Callista didn't mean to hurt you. She was just being outgoing," I finished for her. "I've heard that one." Callista's voice rose. "You've always been jealous, you know that. You twist every little thing into some grand injustice." "I don't have to twist anything," I said. "You documented it yourself." Her jaw clenched. "You're pathetic." Dad's voice cut in, firm. "That's enough, both of you." But there was something in his tone, something new. Doubt. Eloan had once told me, truth doesn't need defenders, it just needs time. And in that moment, I saw the first crack in their certainty. I stood slowly. I didn't come here to argue. I came to return what's mine, the truth. What you do with it is your choice. As I turned to leave, Mom called out, "Don't do this to the family, Emerald." I paused by the doorway. I'm not doing anything to the family. I'm just finally stepping out of its shadow. The rain had stopped by the time I got to my car. The world smelled like wet cedar and something clean. I sat there, breathing in, letting the quiet settle. I didn't win tonight. But for the first time in years, I wasn't erased. When I got home, I set my phone on the counter and poured a glass of water. The city lights flickered through the rain-streaked window. I opened my laptop and saved one more file, family_dinner_proof.pdf. Just as I was closing the folder, my phone buzzed. A message from Eloan. It's spreading. Someone must have uploaded it. Callista's clip, it's everywhere. I stared at the screen for a long time. The video wasn't mine to post, but someone had done it. The internet was already talking. The comments were pouring in. I didn't feel guilty. Not exactly. Things have a way of surfacing when they've been buried too long. I set the phone face down, leaned back, and let the sound of the rain fill the silence. It wasn't the video that broke her, it was the silence that followed. By Monday morning, the rain had stopped, but the storm hadn't. It just moved online. I woke up to a dozen messages lighting up my phone before I'd even made it to the kitchen. One stood out from the rest, a text from a college friend I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, is this your sister?" Attached was a link. I clicked it, half dreading, half knowing what I'd see. There it was, the video Aloan had given me. The clip of Callisto laughing as she took off my engagement ring to get a better shot. It was on a wedding gossip subreddit, with the title, "Influencer Steals Her Sister's Engagement Ring for Clout, Gets Caught on Camera." Over 1 million views. Thousands of comments. People were furious. Not at me, at her. Wow, this is low even for influencer culture. That poor sister, imagine your family treating you like that. This woman's whole personality screams entitlement. I scrolled for a while, my stomach twisting. It should have felt good, vindicating, even, but there was a strange hollowness in it. Seeing strangers dissect our family felt like watching a private wound televised. Justice, yes. But messy, public, and sharp-edged. By noon, I got another message, this time from Aloan. They're all over her Instagram now. It's going viral. I opened Callista's page. Overnight, her follower count had dropped by tens of thousands. Her latest photo, smiling, hand raised to show off the ring, was flooded with comments. "So this is the ring you borrowed. Apologize to your sister. Your silence says everything." For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being silenced. By the afternoon, Callista posted a story. Her face looked pale, her tone practiced, the same one she used when pretending to care about a charity event. "Hey, everyone," she began, voice tight. "There's been a lot of misinformation going around. The ring thing was a misunderstanding. My sister and I are fine. We just have different personalities, she's more private, I'm more outgoing. Please don't believe everything you see online." It was almost impressive, how quickly she turned herself into the victim. But the internet didn't buy it. The comments came faster than she could delete them. People reposted the video, dissected her tone, compared timestamps. Even the wedding brand she'd tagged in her posts issued a statement the next day, distancing themselves. Her world, the one built on filters and followers, was cracking. And I didn't have to lift a finger. I didn't post it. I didn't comment. I didn't even share. I just watched. Quietly. It's a strange thing, seeing justice unfold without your participation. There's no rush of victory. Just a deep exhale that's been waiting years to escape. By the end of the week, Mom called. "You've seen the mess online, haven't you?" she asked, voice brisk, controlled. "I have. This is getting out of hand. You need to call your sister." "I don't think she wants to hear from me," I said. "Emerald, be the bigger person. The family is in shambles. Everyone's talking." "I didn't start this, Mom. I didn't even share the video." "That doesn't matter," she snapped. "People think you did." There it was, the family creed again, perception over truth. "Maybe," I said slowly, "people are finally seeing what I've been saying all along." She hung up without another word. By Sunday, there was another family dinner. Smaller this time. The backyard looked emptier, no decorations, no forced laughter. Even the air felt heavy, cautious. I went mostly out of curiosity. I wanted to see how silence looked when it finally turned on her. Callista was already there, sitting at the table, sunglasses on though the sky was cloudy. She looked smaller somehow, her confidence dimmed. When I walked in, she glanced up, then quickly down at her phone. No one said hello. Mom served food without comment. Dad cleared his throat once or twice but didn't speak. The conversation that usually revolved around Callista's projects was replaced by the clinking of silverware and the distant hum of cicadas. Finally, she broke the silence. So, are we all just going to pretend this isn't happening? No one answered. Dad, she pressed, her voice rising. You're not even going to say something. He looked at her, tired. What do you want me to say, Callista? That it's not true. That I'm not that person they're saying I am. Mom started to say something but stopped. I'd never seen her hesitate before. I mean, come on. Callista said, voice cracking now. This family has always had its issues, but we don't destroy each other like this. Still, nothing. It hit me then, they didn't stand up for me when I was humiliated, but now, they weren't standing with her either. Justice had come quietly, not as applause, but as isolation. The kind that echoes. I didn't say a word the entire meal. I didn't need to. For once, silence was on my side. After dinner, I stood up, thanked Mom for the food, and turned to leave. As I reached the doorway, Callista's voice followed me, small and shaky. Are you happy now? I paused but didn't turn around. No, I said. But I'm finally not invisible. That night, back at home, I opened the small glass box I'd placed on my bookshelf. Inside, under a soft light, sat the engagement ring, whole again. I'd had the diamond reset in its band, not to wear, but to keep. It wasn't a reminder of what I lost, but of what I reclaimed. It was never about the jewelry. It was about who gets to be seen, and who gets to tell the story. As I closed the lid, I caught my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back looked steady. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was disappearing. When the silence turns on them, they finally understand what it did to me. The morning light filtered through my apartment window in soft golden streaks, catching the edges of the furniture and dust motes suspended in the still air. It was a gentle sun, one that didn't press too hard against the glass, more of a suggestion than a demand. I sipped my coffee slowly, its warmth seeping into my hands. The taste was bittersweet, just like the silence that had taken up residence in my life lately. A silence I had come to cherish, even as it echoed with everything unsaid. I stared out at the street below, people walking their dogs, heading to work, living lives untouched by my family's unraveling. I breathed in deeply, then let the air leave my lungs slowly, steadying myself. Tonight, I would go to dinner. I would walk back into that house where too many wounds were passed off as traditions and too many truths were swallowed for the sake of appearances. That evening, I stood in front of my parents' house longer than necessary, keys in hand, trying to decipher what I hoped to find behind the door. The front yard was oddly bare, no string lights, no seasonal reeds, no chatter or clinking glasses from the backyard as there once might have been. The house had always been a performance stage. Tonight, the stage was empty, the audience uncertain. When I stepped inside, a chill met me, not from the air, but from the tension that hung like fog. The dining room table was set, yes, but it looked more like a museum display than a place for a family gathering. Polished cutlery. Folded napkins. Fewer seats than usual. I noticed that right away. I walked in quietly, and my eyes locked with my father's across the table. For a fleeting moment, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked aged, not in years but in wear. The kind of tired that sinks deep into your bones. His usual authority had softened into something more fragile, maybe regret. Everyone else stood when I entered. Callista hesitated a second longer, then reluctantly slid back into her chair without saying a word. Our mother gave me a tight-lipped smile. It was polite. Hollow. The kind of smile you give to a neighbor you barely tolerate. Dinner began with murmured politeness. Nobody spoke of anything real. There were comments about the weather, how unseasonably warm it had been. A new family moving in down the street. The neighbor's dog that wouldn't stop barking. Safe topics. Neutral ground. But the real storm was internal, and my plate felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the food, but because every bite reminded me of years I had choked down silence just to keep the peace. Halfway through the meal, my father cleared his throat. It wasn't casual. It was intentional. Measured. He raised his glass slightly, his eyes not leaving mine. Emerald, he said, voice lower than usual, almost uncertain, I should have said something a long time ago. You've been treated unfairly. For far too long. A stillness fell over the table. Dense. Crushing. I felt every eye turn to me, but it was Callista's gaze I noticed most. Her face went cold, sharp, like broken porcelain. My chest clenched. I wasn't prepared for this moment, though I had dreamed of it. Validation, too late, was a complicated gift. Mom's hand froze mid-reach. Her napkin, half-folded, slipped from her lap like an afterthought. I could hear my pulse in my ears. My breathing shallowed. I wanted to speak, but the words felt lodged somewhere beneath years of gaslighting and polite dismissals. Then, suddenly, Callista shoved her chair back with a scrape. The sound cut through the room. She stood, rigid. Fine, she snapped, voice cracking. Whatever. She didn't wait for a reply. She stormed off, through the kitchen, slamming the screen door behind her like punctuation. Mom didn't chase after her. Instead, she turned toward me, eyes sharper now, no longer hiding behind manners. You're dividing this family, she said quietly. Her words were like splinters. I stared at her, the sting immediate, but my voice didn't shake. If speaking the truth divides us, then maybe we were never whole. The silence that followed was cavernous. For the first time, it wasn't filled with forced laughter or masked judgment. It was honest. And that was something. Later, I stepped out onto the porch, needing air. The dusk had crept in, painting the sky in muted indigos and soft pinks. I pulled out my phone, a strange instinct tugging at me, and opened Callista's profile. My breath caught. She hadn't just unfollowed me. She had erased me. Posts I'd written on her birthdays, gone. Photos from family vacations, road trips, movie nights, gone. Childhood memories where we were both tagged, either cropped or deleted. I wasn't invisible. I was intentionally removed. Rewritten out of her life. It wasn't digital cleansing. It was personal. It was her declaration. I stood in that cold silence, fingers frozen over the screen. My throat tightened in a way that had nothing to do with sadness. This wasn't grief. This was betrayal dressed in pixels. I opened my settings and, without hesitation, blocked her everywhere. No speeches. No messages. Just a quiet digital severance. She could celebrate herself without me from now on. I wouldn't pretend anymore. I left the house without saying goodbye. No dramatic exit. Just a door closing behind me and the soft flicker of the porch lights in my wake. I walked to my car with a strange sense of calm. Like walking away from a burning building knowing you won't look back. Later that night, a knock broke the silence. I opened the door to see my father, standing there in the rain. His shoulders were wet, his face more vulnerable than I'd ever seen. "You were always the strongest one," he said quietly. His voice trembled. I didn't know how to protect you." I didn't speak right away. There was nothing left to explain. So I stepped forward, and we embraced. No apologies. No conditions. Just a moment where two people finally stopped pretending. Under the porch light's dim glow, we stood in silence. And somehow, it felt like a beginning. Because I didn't leave to punish them. I left to protect the part of me they never took the time to see. The weeks after that final confrontation passed like smoke drifting through sunbeams, visible for a moment, then gone. I fell into a rhythm that felt almost like healing. My mornings began in the studio, hands sinking into clay, reshaping grief into vessels and bowls. My afternoons were slow, peppered with phone calls from the few friends who had stayed after everything collapsed. And in the evenings, I watched the sky. There was something about the light over Portland, soft and forgiving, that reminded me that not everything needed to be loud to be strong. The engagement ring, once the emblem of a life stolen from me, now sat inside a square glass box on my studio shelf. It wasn't on my finger anymore, but it watched me quietly, a witness to the quiet strength I was rebuilding piece by piece. It had once symbolized a promise. Now, it was something else entirely, a line, a truth, a refusal. Then, on an unremarkable afternoon, a message lit up my phone. "Can we meet? It's important. Eloan." I stared at the text for longer than I should have, unsure what to expect, unsure if I even wanted anything from her. But something in me said yes. Maybe not to her. But to something overdue. We met at a coffee shop tucked into a quieter corner of downtown. The kind of place with chipped mugs and couches that felt like they remembered stories. She was already there, seated by the window, her fingers wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. Her hair was a little longer than before, and her eyes were tired but clear. She looked up as I walked in, and for a moment, neither of us moved. She gestured to the seat across from her. I sat down slowly, my heart oddly still. We didn't order. We didn't speak for a while. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it just was. The noise of espresso machines, laughter from the next table, and the soft hum of indie music became the soundtrack to the space between us. Then she spoke. Her voice was quiet. But sure. "I sent it," she said. "The clip. I uploaded it." Her words landed like a gust of wind knocking over everything I'd carefully stacked in my chest: anger, confusion, relief, betrayal. But underneath it all was something heavier and quieter: understanding. My mouth was dry. "Why?" I asked, not with accusation, but genuine need. Eloan looked straight at me. "Because I hated the idea of you disappearing again." Her eyes didn't waver. "Because that night, you said something I couldn't unhear, that your silence had been mistaken for weakness. And you were right. I believed you. I believe you." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes before I could stop them. But they weren't shameful. They weren't even sad. They felt like rain after too many dry months. I didn't reach for her hand, though I wanted to. I let myself breathe instead. Let my chest stop bracing. "You didn't have to," I whispered. She shook her head. "I did. Because that night at the lake house when we were kids, when they forgot your tooth fairy note. When they photoshopped you out of the family picture. When they acted like you were a phase. I said nothing. I thought I was keeping the peace. But really, I was helping them erase you. I couldn't be silent anymore. You deserved someone to translate silence into truth. That did it." I cried, not loudly, but deeply. The kind of cry that breaks a dam you didn't realize was still holding. We sat in the noise of that cafe like it was a cathedral, the two of us cloaked in something holy, redemption, maybe. Maybe just recognition. We didn't say goodbye with hugs. We parted with a nod. A promise rebuilt. A year passed. I moved to Seattle with my fiancé. We rented a little house in Ballard, not far from the docks, where the salt air bit in the morning and softened by dusk. I taught ceramics classes at the community center and sold my work at weekend markets. I felt grounded in ways I never thought possible. The ring no longer adorned my hand. Instead, it sat in a shadow box mounted on the studio wall. Beneath it, I had engraved a small plaque. Proof. Not possession. Sometimes, I would glance at it before leaving the house. Not with bitterness. But as a quiet reminder of the line I would never let anyone cross again. My body, my voice, my story, mine. One evening, after cleaning glaze from my hands, I saw a message on my phone. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Callista. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered above the message. I waited for some kind of emotional wave, rage, sorrow, nostalgia. But none came. What I felt instead was distance. Not coldness. Just space. I deleted the message. No reply. Not out of cruelty. But because I no longer needed her apology to validate my healing. Sometimes, closure doesn't come in the form of words. It comes in the absence of reaction. That weekend, I got in my car and drove south. Toward Oregon. Toward the house I once called home. Not to revisit. But to let something go. When I arrived, the sun was setting, painting the lawn in gold and rust. I parked at the curb. Walked up the path. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. No one saw me. In my hands, I carried a small ceramic bird I'd sculpted weeks ago, perched on a delicate branch, wings tucked in. Inside it, I'd embedded a tiny emerald stone, one that used to belong to my grandmother's earring. One they said was lost. I had found it, long ago, in a drawer they never thought I'd open. I placed the bird on the porch step. No note. No signature. Just the act. A silent message. A boundary. A parting. I turned and walked away. The wind stirred the trees. The ceramic bird caught the last of the daylight and glimmered green. I didn't look back. That night, back in Seattle, lying in my bed, I felt a kind of clarity I'd never known. A soft hum in my bones. I realized something. I hadn't stayed in the past to be acknowledged. I had walked away so I could finally see myself, without distortion. My phone didn't ring. No texts followed. And I didn't wait for them. Because healing, I've learned, isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet choice. The silence you choose. The goodbye you don't explain. The strength to walk, not toward, but away. You can heal in silence. But you grow when you choose your own volume. Morning sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains of my Seattle studio, casting a warm, golden glow across the room. It touched everything gently, the curve of the ceramic bowls on my shelves, the delicate handle of my favorite mug, the unfinished sculpture sitting quietly in the corner. Light had become a language in this place. A language of healing, of soft beginnings, of breath. I poured green tea into two mismatched cups, both handcrafted, both mine, and carried them to the small table by the window. My fiancé was already there, waiting for me. He didn't speak as I set his cup down. He didn't need to. We'd grown into a kind of silence that felt like safety, not distance. A silence where no explanations were owed. Only understanding. Steam curled from our cups in graceful spirals, disappearing into morning air. We sat across from each other, fingers loosely wrapped around warm porcelain. "You doing okay?" he asked quietly, finally breaking the stillness. I looked at him for a moment, then smiled, small but real. "More than okay," I replied. "I'm peaceful." And I meant it. Not in the performative way I used to say I was fine while swallowing anxiety. Not as a shield to convince others I wasn't unraveling. No, this was different. This peace came not from apologies offered too late, or from validation that never arrived. It came from releasing the expectation that those things would ever come. From choosing myself, over and over again. In the weeks that followed, life unfolded in quiet rhythms. I taught pottery classes at a nearby studio, my fingers shaping clay into forms that held pieces of me, grief, strength, growth. I packaged and shipped custom orders to places I'd never been, to people who found beauty in my craft. In the evenings, I'd walk by the water, watching how the tide always came back, no matter how far it had retreated. Healing didn't come in waves. It came in moments. And they were finally mine. One rainy afternoon, I hesitated before opening my laptop. Not for work. Not for business. For something else. I hadn't checked social media in months. Not since everything unraveled. But I was no longer afraid of what I'd see. This time, I logged in not to dig through the past, but to witness how far I'd come from it. Callista's once polished profile was almost unrecognizable. The curated perfection had faded. Her feed, once bursting with endorsements, brunch snapshots, and designer tags, was now sparse. Most posts were gone. Tagged photos, collaborations, affiliate links, deleted or scrubbed. I blinked at the screen, unsure if I felt anything at all. Word had trickled down through mutual acquaintances, whispered in passing or tucked into emails. Sponsors had cut ties. Invitations stopped arriving. Her presence had thinned. Not because I had destroyed it, but because it had been built on borrowed truth. And borrowed truth always comes due. I didn't feel triumph. Not really. There was no joy in watching someone else fall. Only a strange, sobering calm. I didn't gloat. I didn't screenshot anything. I just closed the browser and exhaled. Consequences don't always need applause. Sometimes, they just need time. Not long after, a cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail. Oregon postmark. My parents' handwriting. An invitation, formal, embossed, painfully nostalgic. A milestone anniversary celebration back home. I held it between my fingers, the edges sharp. My chest tightened with a familiar mix of longing and dread. I read the invitation once. Then again. Then I wrote a short, deliberate reply. "Thank you. Wishing you peace. From afar." No explanation. No excuses. Just enough. I didn't go. No train tickets. No packing bags. No revisiting old places that once demanded my silence. Years ago, I would have sacrificed myself to be present for them. But now, I'd learned the power of being absent. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Distance was no longer avoidance. It was survival. Later that week, while dusting the shelves of my studio, my eyes landed on a familiar glass shadow box tucked beside a vase. Inside it sat the emerald ring, once stolen, now returned, but never the same. Beneath it, a small plaque I had engraved. Not what was stolen, what survived. I pressed my fingertips gently to the glass. It wasn't just a symbol of loss anymore. It was proof. Not of the injustice, but of my reclamation. Of everything I had taken back in my own quiet way. That evening, I finalized details for my upcoming exhibition. I had titled it The Ring and the Silence. It wasn't just about the ring, or the betrayal. It was about what remained. Each ceramic piece represented something that couldn't be stolen: memory, voice, autonomy. Some shapes were smooth, others jagged. Some pieces were left intentionally incomplete, because not every wound finishes cleanly. Opening night was intimate but full. Friends arrived, new and old. Fellow artists, curious gallery-goers, a few students from my classes. They moved slowly through the space, pausing in front of each sculpture, tracing textures with their eyes, leaning into the emptiness I'd left on purpose. People asked gentle questions. I answered honestly. Not to accuse. Not to shame. Just to share. Did you ever expect this outcome? Someone asked as they stood near the ring's display. I looked at them. My throat tightened, but I didn't flinch. No, I said. I only expected to survive. The words settled in the air like dust. Not dramatic. Just true. As the evening wound down, I stood beside the shadow box for a final moment and addressed the room. Some stories aren't told to shame the past, I said, voice steady. They're told to reclaim it. People nodded. A few wiped their eyes. The silence that followed was respectful, full, not empty. Later, as I drove home under a low, silver moon, the city lights blurred behind me. The road stretched out ahead, wide and open. I thought of the girl I used to be, meek, uncertain, aching for approval. And then I thought of the woman I was now, rooted, clear-eyed, unapologetically choosing her own path. I hadn't burned bridges. I had simply stopped crossing ones that led to harm. And maybe that was the quietest kind of revolution. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about victory. It was about reclamation. It was about proving, without saying a word, that an emerald never dulls. It endures. Just like me. And in that, I found the beginning I'd been waiting for all along. Sometimes, the ones we love the most are the ones who wound us the deepest. But healing doesn't always mean mending broken relationships. Sometimes, it means choosing peace over permission, and distance over damage. What would you do if someone in your family crossed a line that couldn't be undone? If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. There are more real, raw